So, hello everyone. Welcome to the June event. And Kyla, would you like to start the slides? Here we go. We got a couple more people coming in. Well, I can introduce myself. My name's Danielle Pebbles. I'm the Associate Program Director. Crystal is also here with me, but I will be the one that's running it. And it's my first time doing this on my own. So I hope you all have a little bit of patience with me. We have a couple more people coming in. Do you want to say hello, Crystal?
Hello, Crystal. You knew that was coming right when you said that. Yep, I'm me, and I was in the yard gardening, so you won't see my face tonight. But appreciate you all taking time out of your night to come and listen to this amazing presentation we have.
And moving on to the next slide, we're always searching for sponsors for UXPA MN. It helps us with all of our really fun presentations and different like happy hours and our summer social and all and the winter soiree and all of that throughout the year. There's brand exposure, networking, access to all the amazing talent that we have going on here. And we have one of our sponsors here tonight, Rachel, that I think not a merit prize. That's one of our other sponsors. Here we go. Horizontal.
Yes. Um, Thanks everybody. I will just do a quick introduction and kind of just explain who Horizontal is and what we do. So we're excited to be here tonight as a premium sponsor of the UXPA a partnership we've probably sponsored for over a year now. So myself, I'm a recruiter here at Horizontal in the creative and digital space. We have a long history of being here in Minneapolis. We've been doing UX staffing and project work for over 20 years now, and we're headquartered in the west end of St. Louis Park. Specifically, my team and I focus on connecting top UX, product, creative talent with opportunities at companies of all sizes. On the slide, you can see that JP is on the slide as well. He's one of our account managers who works directly with hiring teams. So if you're hiring, feel free to reach out to JP, myself, or anyone on our team. We have a deep network of UX professionals, many of whom are likely already active UXPA members. And then just to clarify, I'm part of Horizontal Talent, which is our staffing arm. But we also have a sister company, Horizontal Digital, who they lead UX and digital transformation projects. So here in the Twin Cities and all over. So if that type of work is something that you would be interested in, I'd be happy to connect you with that team as well. But that's a little bit about us, but I will drop my LinkedIn in the chat as well as our job board. So feel free to browse that, reach out, send a connection, but thanks for having us.
It's awesome to have you here, Rachel. Thank you. We're gonna go back a slide to Ameriprise. Sorry. Just to say that they're our new sponsor today. They aren't speaking at this event, but they will be speaking at the upcoming events that we have, which is including the summer social, and we'll have more speaking things once a month for there we go. We have it at the roughly around the third week of every month. So, all right, now we can kind of start moving along. And speaking of the summer social, save the date. It's Monday, July 21st. And Corian, I don't know if you want to say any extra things about the summer social today. Oh, I guess he can't say it because he's not a presenter. But it is Monday, July 21st. There will be food, there will be drinks, there will be pickleball courts, and those will be up on the website pretty soon so that you can come and reserve your spot. And then we will be having our lovely sponsors there that you can talk to, as well as a lot of other people to mingle and get to know. And then who you are all here to see tonight is Cajetan. Cajetan is my former manager, and he is a wonderful human being. And he has a great presentation tonight. And to give you an idea of like how this will run is that generally we have it where the questions are towards like the end of the presentation. Cajetan generally like invites people to come and talk and ask questions kind of during it, if you would like. And I'm going to ask that you don't like call them people like popcorn, but like if anybody would like to volunteer information with it to in some of his questions, that is totally okay to do. And then Kaiten, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm as ready as I'll ever be. All right. Hi, everyone. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Can you all see my screen? I guess let me get this. Whoop. All right. Can you see my screen? Yes. Well, hold on a second here. I got
Nope,
an
not
issue
yet.
with. Yeah, you can see it?
Nope.
Nope. Okay, let's try again. Thanks, Zoom. Here we go. Trying again. Share.
There it is.
You can see it now. All right, excellent. Okay, so I'm going to start out with a little bit about me. So my name's Cajetan Baptista. Cajetan, right in the presentation. It says it on that first line there underneath the heading stuff. I'm currently located in St. Paul, Minnesota. I mean, to be truthful, it's Egan, but the zip code thing, I'm in St. Paul according to zip code. It's fine. My age, I'm too old for this stuff right now. I figured out today when I was making this presentation that um, I've been doing this longer than half the time I've been alive at this point with UX design stuff and all of that. As you can see, years of experience in the industry, 27, and I'm currently the UX manager at TCP Software. It's Time Clocks Plus software, and yes, you'd be guessing that we do something with time clocks, and that is true. I'm also I know this happens sometimes that you're the UX manager, but you don't get to hire people. I actually do get to hire people. It's kind of cool to be in that position at this point in my career. I got my life in four bubbles here. So I tried to be slick and make them entertaining and also serve more than one purpose. So I like Lego and I like Star Wars. I love my black cat and I also like napping. Sometimes I'm alert, and my macaw, Peanut, she is also alert in that picture. And then lastly, I've got my African gray there, and he's hiding under the covers. And Danielle, who encouraged me to do this, believes in me. And she says, I'm an indoor cat, which is a true thing. I'm an indoor cat, more of an introvert than I'm an extrovert. So I'm going to try my best here to make this entertaining for you, but I might hide under the covers at some point. All right, moving forwards. How did I get here? All right, here's some random bubbles that barely make any sense to any of you, but I'll explain them. I arrived in this universe 2 years before Star Wars the movie came out, so that would put me at 50 this year. And my mother and father are from India. I was born in England. Then I moved to the US. And then I went through some time in high school, which, it was what it was, and ended up in college doing a double major in psychology and sociology. And while I was doing that, I was also near the end of that run, I got into writing some really bad poetry online on GeoCities, if you can remember GeoCities and Angel Fire. I used both, and I learned basic HTML and basic web design. writing the worst poetry you could imagine. I mean, think like E. Cummings with the feelings of Darth Vader. That's kind of what it was like, like Anakin Skywalker, Darth Vader when he was young and really intense. Um, I also had a love of basketball cards. And no surprise, I mean, when you're a bit of an introverted person, you might have a hobby that involves collecting little bits of paper and tirelessly organizing them over and over again. Um, they also had pictures and data all over them, so it's no surprise that I ended up being a person who likes UX. So what happened was one day I was in the local card store, and the guy behind the counter was complaining. He says, my website is terrible. It's terribly designed. And the truth was, back then, everything was terribly designed. But I was feeling confident and said, hey, you give me 2 weeks and a couple $1,000, I'll build the entire thing for you and it'll be great. It wasn't great, but it was done and it worked out for him. It was better than whatever I'd been doing on GeoCities. And from there, I ended up, kicking off a career that has spanned this 27 years now. And in that time, um, worked for Hewlett Packard. I've worked for Google. I've worked for California State Parks and got an award from them for doing something involving virtual tours. I worked for Best Buy, Pearson, Ally. These are just the highlights. I mean, it goes on because I did a lot of contracting for a long time and I really enjoyed it. And I did do some work with Horizontal Talent for just a little bit. And I remember it being awesome. So I recommend you all get in touch with them. They're really good if you're looking for stuff to do. I remember them having a really good team, and I'm sure they still have a really good team at this point. So, other things about me. I'm currently managing for Time Clock Plus. I already said that, and I'm a hiring manager there. This is telling you like how I've been editing this over and over again, and added that to the front when I meant to say it later. Been a hiring manager for 6 years straight now. We're currently not hiring right now. If you'd like to reach out to me further, you can. I will put my LinkedIn and stuff in the chat, and feel free to reach out if you need some tips and all kinds of other stuff. I know it's really rough out there right now, and it's been hard for everybody. I experienced a little bit of that horror show for the first 3 months last year, where I was suddenly without something and went into this market the way it is right now, and it's no joke. It's difficult. I have plenty of tips to help with that, even though I can't hire anyone right now. So feel free to reach out. It's not the first time I've had to do this, and I'll tell you, I've seen people. It's not the first time it's been rough. It's not the first time. It might be the first time I have to present like this to people in my industry, but I've seen people switch careers. I've seen people take up other jobs and say, okay, it doesn't matter what you do. It's going to be okay at some point. If you can make it through what's happening with the market right now, it will calm down at some point. And we're going to get to what am I going to talk about here? So a little bit more about stuff, right? I've seen a lot of design trends, a lot of design styles, a lot of leaders come and go, and I put design trends there twice. Please ignore that. I've seen this culling of design talent happen before. We've got this constant feeling that we don't have a seat at the table. It's real, but there's reasons for that. And research is required, but we're not getting enough time to conduct it. And we're being asked to do A/B tests, which is not really UX research when you think about it. It can be part of it, but it's not the part we want to do, right? And then on top of that, sometimes the stakeholders involved are just like, just make me something. I don't have any time. The company doesn't have any time. And part of what I'm going to talk about, right, is survival, right? And going through these 27 years and like watching the industry now and seeing some of the designers that are coming up, I'm watching them missing out on some basic principles. I'm watching them miss out on certain types of things they can say to the stakeholders to describe those principles and how to talk about them. And also, I'm seeing a lot of people like letting LinkedIn design influencers guide them. And I would strongly suggest to you all just don't pay attention to LinkedIn design influencers. They're often wrong, and we'll get to more of that in a second. I feel like I've been doing a lot of talking about me, And like any semi-decent UX researcher, I want to know something about you. So I've got this sort of kind of basics, right? Gestalt principles, aesthetic usability effects, scanning patterns, choice paralysis, the Hick-Hyman principles, and Miller's law. And what I'd like to know from all of you is like, give me some descriptions of what your experience is with those things in chat. And hopefully it isn't things like, oh yeah, I learned that in school and forgot about it. That would be weird. But what do you guys know about these things? And Danielle, you're going to relate them to me with words because I
Yep.
can't see the chat while I do this.
So in the webinar chat, you can put any pieces in there and I'll relay it back to Cajetan. And Christopher, I do see that you're having trouble finding your grid view. I think that we don't have the attendees on video currently.
The attendees aren't on video, but if you go in the upper right-hand corner of Zoom, that's how you change the view from grid to other views if you can't see the controls.
Is that helpful?
Did the heat make everyone tired? Come on, everyone, let's get going. Let's ask
No
some
questions?
stuff. Get out there, get some stuff in
All
here.
right. If you don't have questions about this, we can move on to something where you answer the questions or answers about this. We might have something better on the next slide. Let's do it. This is move.
All right.
All right. So what happens to you when you absolutely can't do research? Why are you repeating research that already exists? How do we distinguish needing to research something or not needing to research something? What about when you're only allowed to validate in your research, which happens? So my question to you is, in any of these scenarios, what do you do? How does that work for you right now in your career or in your attempts to, get hired again? Anyone have any comments?
I don't see a comment here, but I have some questions.
Okay.
Is that when you say what happens when you absolutely can't do any research, what would be like the standard forms of research that people would be wanting that you would?
Well, I mean, it depends, right? I mean, what would you want to do research wise? You'd want to interview users. Maybe you'd want to do something really complicated and you'd want to hang out with a user all day, like do a contextual interview style thing. Maybe you'd want to do surveys. Maybe you'd want to do usability studies on prototypes. Maybe you'd find yourself needing to, gosh, look at, do competitive research in ways where you contact people that you know and stuff like this. I mean, it really depends on what you're stuck with. But there are all kinds of situations, at least in my experience, where you get a small opportunity to do research and that's it, right? The company is just like, look, we got to move. We haven't got time to move forwards. We haven't got time to sit there and wait. We have to move forwards. Excuse me. So when you're in those situations, I mean, I'm curious about the people who are watching this. Like, what do they do? What's their way out? What's your way out, Danielle, when you're in this situation of you just have to jam and get something done?
Well, I feel like mine's not going to be standard, but who knows what is standard in this role anymore. But like, there have been times if I can't do research or I don't have the budget to do research, is that I start combing through like our App Store reviews or old research that we've had inside of our company to kind of see what has already existed to be able to like throw some things at stakeholders here and there and try and like always gain purchase by being like why research would help us move forward in some of these choices. Would that be useful?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's all useful. I'm just curious if anyone has any stories about that happening to them and what kind of stuff happens. But
So
if
there's
we're
a
having
lot of
trouble with that,
information. Sorry, there's a lot going on in the chat
oh,
because the actual attendees aren't panelists, so it's hard for us to make them speakers.
Oh,
We've got to take them off, and that's not how this was set up.
okay. That's all
And so
right.
there's a lot of input and questions and
Oh,
feedback
in chat.
rolling in the chat. So if you want
How
to
do
open
I
that,
let me open the chat. Hold on.
we got lots going on out there. There's lots of engagement.
Okay, I need to figure out how to make chat appear here. Danielle, can you see the chat?
Yep. And I can
Okay.
read it through. Sorry, everybody. They kind of all came through at the same time. Um, let's see, and now they're coming through again.
Okay. What do we have?
We have Corian saying, I like to try to validate my ideas and a hypothesis quickly and use that to guide where I want to focus my research.
Not bad.
Gestalt underlies so many design issues. Important to understand that perception and understanding has so much top-down influence, brains filling in the gaps and making assumptions.
Mhm.
No one says that I can't do research, but I'm loaded up with design assignments that would be enough for 3 designers. I feel you on that.
Yep. I know that situation.
I've never been in a situation where I can't do any research. That sounds like a nightmare.
It's real though. It happens.
And repeating research might be necessary if an update or change occurs or enough time passes. And if I couldn't do research or much, I'd look into existing research. What has my company already done? Are there similar experiences we have that I could look at? Are there existing reports on relevant topics that would be helpful? What are UX best practices for what I'm trying to solve?
All
I reached
right.
out to the support team for customer feedback and thoughts there. And I got
Okay.
one more,
One more.
two more.
Two more. Engagement is happening. Hooray.
There was something I couldn't test recently, time and budget constraints, so I ended up using Gemini to do deep research, which spit out a report with a lot of useful info to back up my recommendations. Customer feedback is huge. Customer
Mhm.
feedback from support and installation teams. I've had to do that in the past. It gave me leverage to buy budget and time for research. And then the last one is I've rarely had the luxury of working with researchers. Many companies, especially B2B, feel like we know our users, so only input comes from account managers, not end users. I often have to do guerrilla research, e.g. testing prototypes in the break room. I've done that.
Yep. I've done that too. I know that situation. All right.
Thank you.
So I forgot something as we're going through this. So I forgot something. That's why this is here. One of the other reasons I'm here is I wrote this book, and you should all read it. Go to Amazon, my name comes up. And we're going to dive into the Gestalt principles first as things to talk about. And I'm going to talk about them in two different ways. One is you can use them to convince stakeholders what you need to convince them of involving layouts um, in your UI designs, which I know it's controversial, but UI is part of UX. You know, and if you're trying to get by in this market right now, you need to have some UI chops as well as your UX chops. It's not all going to be one thing or another for most companies out there. So we're going to talk about the Gestalt principles. And if you don't know what they are, that would be fine. I think if you do know what they are, that's great, and you probably should at this point in your career. Well, no matter where you start in UX, you've probably heard about them. And I'm going to say this little robot here that is part of the book and also part of everything you're going to see here was actually based on my employee Danielle. That's what happened. Working with her is kind of like this little robot sometimes. So. Um, Gestalt principles developed by German psychologists late 19th and 20th centuries. The text says all about what they are. I do want to point out that it is not the same as Gestalt psychology, and sometimes people don't know that. Gestalt psychology is more to do with looking at things from the whole when you're talking about psychology, and it includes the Gestalt principles, but they are kind of an offshoot that is used for visual design as well as used for visual understanding of the world. And it's important if you're talking to stakeholders to not call it Gestalt psychology. Yeah, they might know the difference between the two things, in which case you'll be out of luck trying to convince them of things. So let's talk about these things. Gestalt principles. So proximity. Um, Hopefully you all know about this. If you put things together in a group, they're going to be perceived as things are close together, they're going to be perceived as a group. If they're far away, they're not going to be perceived as part of that group. And I wrote, oh, hi, Google login, because you might have seen a recent example of this, of people that, as a hiring manager, if I saw this, I probably would be like, I'm not sure why I would hire you, because we've got this situation where you're failing to understand the basics of the Gestalt principles. With proximity, you've got these things split apart like this. And if you were wondering, we will get to Apple's liquid glass in a second here when we're talking about Gestalt principles, because it's on everyone's mind recently. Similarity, you've got the situation where if things are together, right, and look similar, the mind automatically groups them together. So the red robots are grouped together, that big one is not, and that's the way that works. All right, move on to the next one, continuity. So this one's a little trickier, right? If elements are placed together on a line or a curve, they're considered like a group. If they're not, going that way, they're not a group anymore. So you look at this and you go, all right, these ones are following the curve up here on the side where it says we followed a curve, and your brain automatically associates and says those things are somehow related in a way. And when you're doing a layout for UI, you kind of follow this all the time when you're doing your navigation elements, when you're doing your layout for your text and where it's all going to be, when you're doing your footer. You want to make sure you're not breaking things that way. And also, it comes to like your information architecture. If you don't put things together following patterns throughout your page, they're not going to understand. People aren't going to understand the group together. And when you're dealing with stakeholders, sometimes they'll be like, "Hey, I've got this new navigation element. I just want to throw it over there." And it helps if you can explain this in a way that is fast and efficient and doesn't require you to go into the users this, the users that. You already know how their brains work a lot of the time with things like how the navigation should be, how a layout should be, right? Okay. Closure doesn't come up very much for us in our in our day to day. At least it doesn't to me. But it's your brain will fill in something when there's enough pieces for it to see what the whole would be, like to just imagine what the whole would be. It fills in the blanks. If you've ever accidentally created a visual illusion, which I had I amazingly did the other day with a card layout. This is what's happening. Your brain is just starting to fill something in. And it can be kind of fun, but generally you want to avoid creating situations where people are imagining things on the screen that aren't there. Figure around. Hey, it's Apple Liquid Glass coming up here. So human instinct places objects in the foreground or the background. And usually when you're looking at a screen, you've got different things that happen. I picked size here to make it easier for us to understand it. But I want to go on to the next thing and talk about Apple and liquid glass, which I'm sure is very popular with everyone here. If it isn't, you haven't looked at LinkedIn lately. But the situation with this is you can't tell if it's in the foreground or the background, and that's bad, right? I mean, besides the accessibility stuff that happens and everything else, you're left with this weird, like they didn't follow figure ground. Probably they had stakeholders who didn't have it explained to them, or something else was going on. I don't know. To be honest, though, I do appreciate that Apple is at least trying to move design forward in some way, even if it's semi backwards, considering that liquid glass has already happened with Windows Vista and has an origin even earlier than that. All right, symmetry and order. Pretty simplistic. You've got your elements that are well organized seem to be grouped together in a certain way. Our brain understands that well. And if you want a strong call to action in something, sometimes you deliberately place something outside of things. You see this all the time, all over apps and everything else. And I do want to say, with this one in particular, if I see a design and you aren't understanding like symmetry and order, chances are I'm not going to be clicking on that. Let's have an interview or something like that, right? Common fate. Elements moving in the same direction are considered related as opposed to stationary elements. This is kind of related to the other one. It's important to know, right? Because there is a sense of movement that happens. If you study art and all this other stuff, you get like the effect on gravity, rhythm, repeating patterns, all of this. It's actually just Gestalt principle that the things that are moving in the same direction are just going to be related to each other in some way or another. So keep that in mind when you think about these things. It is worth having them at your fingertips as a quick reference for when you're dealing with designs. And I'll tell you, 27 years in, I still forget some of these. And I'll look at a screen, I'll look at a layout a designer's presenting to me, I'm like, something wrong with this. I know there's something off. I just can't remember what it is because I'm doing 100 other things a day. And it's nice to just have a quick reference point to these things. And I can just be like, all right, that's what's going on there. Ah, Apple, I knew what you were doing wrong. Okay. Besides your accessibility issues, which is a whole other thing. Now, this one, the next thing I want to talk about is the aesthetic usability effect, which comes up a lot. And the way it happens is you will be presenting to developers, or you'll be presenting to stakeholders of some other kind, executive suite. You'll be presenting to somebody, and you will show them an upgraded design to something that is visually more appealing. And they will say to you, actually, you know what? I'm going to ask a question. What do they say to you? Put it in chat so Danielle can tell me what they say to you when you talk about something visually appealing. What's one of the responses that you get sometimes?
Does it sell?
Does it sell? Okay,
Great, ship it.
great, ship it. That's really nice. Yep. Okay, so I'll tell you, I also get situations where they say, it doesn't matter what it looks like, we just need it to get out there as soon as possible. We're trying to do the MVP. The visuals don't matter, right? Um, I wish you were all talking to me in a room. You could stop me if I was wrong on this one, but this happens, right? They say this kind of stuff all the time. Oh, we don't care about looks. Okay, so this is where you use the aesthetic usability effect, and you can stop them in their tracks with this argument. You just say, so turns out that when people perceive something as aesthetically pleasing, they think it's easier to use. That's just what happens, right? And if you're looking at something and you're like, oh, you see this new car up in the top here, like that's going to be easier to drive, easier to take care of. Everything's going to be easier with it. And then you look at that other car that's kind of beat up and not aesthetically pleasing. You're like, oh, that's going to be a mess. It's going to be really hard to work with, right? Like, it doesn't mean it's true. Like it could be that that's a Cybertruck. Sorry if any of you have those and you like them, I apologize. But it could be that it's a vehicle that is difficult to drive and has all kinds of problems, even though it looks newer or looks aesthetically pleasing, which is arguable about any kind of vehicle. But when you think about that, it's like, does it sell? The answer is yes. Making it aesthetically pleasing does make it sell because it leads to it being something that people think is easier to use. And you want to avoid that all the time, right? With your stakeholders, you don't want them to have a product going out there that people look at and go, oh, that's going to be really difficult. So you can use this as a way to get people to understand the value in making things visually appealing. Which, if you're working for companies over time, you're going to see a lot of them that will do this thing where they will say, no, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. And I will sometimes, it's funny that I put a car there, but I'll sometimes say, so how did you pick your car? Was it just like you just had a functional list and you didn't actually worry about the color? You didn't worry about the look of it in any way whatsoever. You were just like, no, it leans to a little bit of a box with wheels. I'm just going to drive off in it. It'll be fine. Right? People don't do that. Most of us. There are some people who really do that. All right. Scanning patterns. So this is all related to Gestalt principles and aesthetic usability principle. And so I'm going to say aesthetic usability principle is kind of related to these things, right? So scanning patterns, how your eyes move. And hopefully you've all heard of these, but I'll say I've run into a number of designers who have not heard of all of them and do run into trouble sometimes when stakeholders get in their face about why is this layout like this? I want it like this. And they show you something. You're like, oh, no, we can't do that. And you're not sure why. You can't express it clearly, but they'll do that. The other thing that comes up is what side should I put the buttons on? Should they be on the left? Should they be on the right? What about in the top right corner? Or what about in the top left corner? Like, you'll see stakeholders do this. And as a designer, you need to know why you do things the way you do, right? So you've got a couple of different patterns that come up. You've got F pattern, Z pattern, layer cake pattern, and spotted pattern. For our world, F pattern and Z pattern are more common. Layer cake pattern is occasional. Spotted pattern really works more in video games, in my experience of the world. Like I don't see it in our world of, I'm assuming most of us are UX designers that don't work in games. I apologize if you do. A couple of things. One, thank you. And two, you're brilliant, right? I mean, that's great. For those of us that aren't in that world, F pattern, and we'll start there. F pattern is you've got your primary optical, your strong fallow, your weak fallow, and your terminal area. With F pattern, you don't care as much. Now, you might notice with certain types of designs from Microsoft and Google, they were more focused on F pattern, less focused on Z pattern. Your primary optical is where your eye looks first. Your strong fallow is where you look second, but you do it real fast, so you don't pay as much attention. Then you get back to your primary optical. Then you go back over to the strong fallow. Then you go to your weak fallow, and your terminal area kind of stays open. But your eye does end there anyway, because the other optical pattern that we have is the Z pattern, right, which is very old. Started at some point shortly after we were doing printing that someone came up with this, but Gutenberg, the Gutenberg Z pattern. But you've got the primary optical, strong fallow, weak fallow, terminal area. If you notice the terminal area, that is where Apple used to like to put their buttons all the time. If you can recall, before mobile phones became a thing where we're always, or mobile devices, where we're always putting those buttons kind of in the middle when we can, right? Because we want it to be really strong. And that follows more of the F pattern than it does the Z. That said, if you're running into a situation where somebody's asking you as a designer, hey, where do you put that button? Well, we know where it should go. And we shouldn't have to research this. I've had this happen where somebody's been like, oh, do like a couple of A/B tests with my button idea. You can stop them by showing them this research that has happened. Like, oh, these diagrams have been around forever. You get to layer cake pattern. This ends up being utilized more on news sites and things like that. If you're doing that kind of work, that's great. Should be aware of how the layer cake pattern works. And if you're doing spotted pattern stuff, well, I like I said earlier, I kind of envy you for being able to do that. That's awesome. All right. That's the taste I'm giving you of things that are in the book involving this stuff, visual stuff right now. And we're going to move on to choice paralysis and talk about that a little bit. And this is where I'll talk about the LinkedIn influencers, who kind of have got all the older design managers not in a good spot right now. So before I do that, questions and comments about that section of things to do with UI and visuals?
If not, we can also save it towards the end because it takes a little bit for the questions to come through the chat too, Cajetan.
Okay, works for me. And also, it's related to this. Choice paralysis. So this diagram is just a picture, image, animated thing, whatever, a comic, is showing you just the basics of a choice paralysis study that was done that's kind of famous at this point involving jam. Always surprises me how many of us have not heard about this study. And it is pretty important for us all. So what they did was they had jam on sale in a store. Actually, they had a display for the jam on sale in a store on different weekends. And On some weekends, they had 6 jams, and on other weekends, they had 24 jams. And what ended up happening is people went ahead and purchased jams at a much higher rate. And I don't remember off the top of my head what it was, but I think it's in a 400% or some crazy number like that. They were more likely to buy jam when they only had 6 choices. When they had 24 choices, they were less likely to buy jam. And it's like, all right, that's great. How do I explain that to my CEO who is saying to me, I want to have 24 options on the navigation menu for this app that we're making, and I don't want to use anything like progressive disclosure or anything like that. I just want 24 options there. And like, okay, choice paralysis, easy explanation. Chipotle versus a Cheesecake Factory. If you go to Chipotle, you get in a line, you are given 6 choices or less for each of the little bins, right? You're like, okay, tortilla or burrito, taco, quesadilla. Then you move forwards and it's like, all right, here's your meat options, here's your bean options, your rice options, here's your veggie options, and you make quick choices because you've only got a limited number of things to think about. You get to the end and you're like, wow, I have the burrito I wanted, everything is done. And the process that's been happening is progressive disclosure, which is closely tied to choice paralysis and fixing the problem, right, of choice paralysis. And you look at it and you go, oh, I've got my burrito. This is great. Now, compare that to going to Cheesecake Factory if you've been there. Love the Cheesecake Factory personally, but that menu is like some kind of ancient book, right? It's like got at least 40 pages in there, I think. There's long lists of things. It's very hard to read through. Everybody's sitting there waiting to get into there because everybody's taking so long to decide. And they give up and they ask questions and all kinds of other things. However, when you use this example, it's important to understand the other thing with choice paralysis is you don't necessarily use choice paralysis all the time. And this is where some of the LinkedIn influencers are getting on my nerves. Some of the younger designers who don't know this, it can be difficult when you're dealing with a stakeholder who starts arguing with you about choice paralysis and you don't know something really important. So I'm going to leave this question to everybody. Can anyone tell me when choice paralysis applies and when it doesn't? In chat.
We'll give everyone a second to just type it really
Yeah.
quick.
I mean, of course, right now you've got too many choices. I give you a question.
I will use this as we do have an open question in our Q&A that was any
Yeah.
good resources. And I'm not sure if that was related to the choice paralysis or if that was related to the patterning.
So in this little manual, I've got the book that I'm kind of, I wrote. There is for each section, I've got detailed, what do I call it, references. So you can go and find out all the details about all of this stuff if you need to look through and find out more.
I'm sorry, my dog is running through the back of
Yeah.
my screen right now. And they are free to contact you on LinkedIn.
They're free to contact me on LinkedIn if they need more details. Yes.
But in the chat right now, one for choice paralysis is picking a restaurant.
Okay. That's when you when you can get stuck in choice paralysis. But I was thinking more, and I'll get to it. I'm going to show you right now. So when choice paralysis applies, maybe I wasn't specific enough. My wife always teases me. She says, specificity is the soul of narrative, Cajetan. Now, tell me again what you want me to do. What do you want to get out of the kitchen? So being specific, choice paralysis, right? Here's what we're doing. Choice paralysis applies when you get choice set complexity. Are there a number of complicated choices presented? So picking a restaurant, you're correct. Whoever wrote that, you're right. That is a situation where choice paralysis actually applies because there are a lot of complications when you're picking a restaurant, and it can get even more complicated depending on how many people are involved, especially with all our dietary concerns and our likes and our dislikes and everything else. At a certain point, you're just like, I don't know, I give up. Maybe AI can figure it out for me as to where this group of friends is going to dinner. Decision, task, difficulty. And I spent difficulty wrong. Sorry about that. Um, is this decision difficult to make? What might be the consequences of the wrong choice? How long is making the choice supposed to take? These things all contribute to choice paralysis happening. All right, preference uncertainty. Does the person decide to know all about what they want already, or is this a brand new decision? Well, this is something that's kind of interesting to me. You can have an interface with many, many, many choices, and it can be fine if the users coming to it understand exactly what they want. Right. And the best example I can think of this is I happen to be a bit of a sneakerhead. And when I'm on the Nike app, I usually know what shoes I'm looking for. So when I go to search and I see all those other shoes come up, I don't really care because I've focused in on exactly what I want. And I'm not going to get choice paralysis from all those other shoes. I might get excited by one of them as they blow by me on the list for other reasons, but choice paralysis isn't happening to me anymore. I know what I want, right? And often with search, that's how it works. Decision goal. Does the goal of this decision carry more weight? So this one is if you bought a home or a car or anything really expensive where it's going to chain you to paying them back over years and years, you might experience choice paralysis before you do the thing, right? So as designers, when we're working through these types of things, it's important to know with choice paralysis, like where it applies and where it doesn't apply. Because if you don't know how to describe that well, you could be, well, one, you could be lying. And that would be terrible, right? Because they could find out. Or two, you could be making a poor interface decision or a poor workflow decision based on not understanding how this actually works. And there's plenty of books about this topic. There might even be one called Choice Paralysis, if I'm remembering correctly. And I think it's well worth investigating further. All right. Next slide is the Hick-Hyman law, which, oh, I got
I'm
a
going to
question.
stop you
What is it?
for a question. Does choice paralysis apply on a medical history form?
It can. I'd say it definitely could. Yeah,
Why?
I could see it. I could see it coming up just because I had to fill one out this week. What ends up happening is, let me go back. I want to go back. Show navigator. Give me a second. So what happens to me with a medical history form is the way things are laid out sometimes, I find myself not knowing what to fill out first. So I think in a medical history form, personally, I feel like they should give me more details about what I need before I start. I think that I'm oftentimes like going through it and then it'll be like something going on. There's a couple different things actually. There's also decision fatigue happens and Hick-Hyman law happens too. So I want to talk about Hick-Hyman law before I answer your question. So Hick-Hyman law is when I am presented with decisions, right? Less decisions equals less time. And more decisions equals more time between each of those for me to make them. So when I'm doing a medical history form, I will run into the very serious problem of, hey, what blah 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 blah, talk about this thing. And you're like, okay, I'm talking about this thing, and I have to make some decisions about what I'm going to reveal, what I'm not going to reveal. And then I'm dumped to another one, and it takes me more time. And then I'm dumped to another one, and it takes me even more time to make a decision about that. And in the meantime, I'm getting this like problem of all these options without any progressive disclosure for all of my various conditions. And since things aren't sorted correctly a lot of the times on it, like it'll just be a big long list of things like you either have or don't have. And they're not categorized in a way that makes sense on many of these medical forms. I run into choice paralysis really quickly. I don't know how to do anything there. Does that answer your question? Person who asked it. We can talk about that more if you want.
can move on for right now.
We
and
can
then
move
we'll
on.
do some
All
of
right.
the questions. Yeah,
So,
Dana said thank you. Yes.
okay. So when we get to this Heck-Hyman law, sometimes people use this to determine how many things should be on a form or on a navigational page or an interface of some kind. They say, oh, your navigation should only be this many things based on Heck-Hyman law. Heck-Hyman law should be combined with choice paralysis when you're thinking about this. And it also is combined with conditions of what's happening to you, right? Like sometimes if you know exactly what you're looking for when you come to a new interface, it doesn't matter so much that there's many decisions to be made because you already know. Other times, if it's completely new and there's things you've never seen before, might be better to use some progressive disclosure to categorize things so that people are able to navigate a little bit easier. All right. But I do want to talk about the one how can I describe it? Oh, the one nemesis to talking about choice paralysis and the Heck-Hyman law, which is Miller's law. Please, everyone, please get this through your heads. Miller's law does not determine your navigation elements on a page, the number of navigation elements you should have. It is not to do with that. Please stop doing that. Every time I see that on LinkedIn, I'm just like, oh, just stop, please. Because Miller's law is about chunking and memory and how many numbers you can remember. And 7 plus 5 plus minus 2 is great when you're thinking about stuff involving when people have to remember things. The thing is with navigation, you don't have to remember. It's right there on the screen. You can see it. So if you run into people who know what Miller's law is, outside of the claims by certain UX folks who don't understand Miller's law versus choice paralysis, if you run into them, they will correct you. And it's not great. So use choice paralysis for stuff when you're talking about your navigation, when you're talking about your medical history forms and you want to do progressive disclosure. That's the way to talk about it. Also, Heck-Hyman to a certain extent. And also, which I haven't got a slide for, but there's also decision fatigue, which kind of plays into that when you're talking about Heck-Hyman. It's very closely related. Decision fatigue will happen when you are presented with too many things in a row. So salespeople use decision fatigue on you all the time, right? You go to sit to get a car, and what they know in some of their sales book, at least, it talks about this kind of stuff, is what they know is the more decisions they make you make, the lower the quality of your decision making over time. So I start by asking you, what color car? And then I say, well, how fast do you want it to go? And then I talk about tires for some reason. And the next thing you know, I'm talking about the engine and some other weird stuff, and then the interior and everything else. As I ask you more and more questions, I wear you down to the point of where your ability to make a good decision at the end of the process is less than before we started. Now, if you're designing something that way, um, whew, I hope you're not, because your users, you should be treating them better than that. At least in my experience, that's a good thing to do. If you're forced to do that by work and everything else, that's fine. I understand that too. But if you're accidentally designing something like that, probably should evaluate what you're up to. It's important. And I did have this warning for Miller's Law here just as an extra slide because of how often it is misused in describing things. Okay, I have a little bonus section here. The number of times I've been in a room with designers, including myself and stakeholders, and cognitive load is brought up. Cognitive load, woohoo, let's talk about it. All right.
Before you go there, we do have one
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, question away.
I understand that choice paralysis is relevant to when you actually have to choose what you want, but is it relevant when you are just providing information via a form?
Yes, it depends. It's okay. It depends. So when you're providing information via form, depends on the information you're providing. You can always help the user by categorizing things and progressively disclosing. If you've got lots and lots of information, if you've got something that's really simple, it doesn't matter, right? I mean, that's easy. But if there's lots and lots of things happening on that form, you can use progressive disclosure to make it a little bit easier for the person because you're forcing them to make lots of choices one after the other. You're giving them a little bit of decision fatigue, and you might lead to paralysis at some point where you say, I can't do this anymore. And they just stop. And they don't want to move forwards. They see too many things, they get overwhelmed, which is connected to cognitive load, which can I go right into that? We good?
One more. Ever get confused when there are options to pick and none of them are the right ones?
Yes. In those types of situations, you probably want to give someone the ability to type something in if you know that that's happening. And if you personally feel it's happening, you should probably give them an option to type something in. And it's a little past like talking about choice paralysis in a way, and it gets into other things. But yeah, I do get confused sometimes with that. All right. So cognitive load. Been in so many rooms where people are just talking about cognitive load and they're talking about cognitive load. Oh yeah, it's like the common uh, thing to say when a designer is trying to say less things should be on the screen. Now, we just talked about choice paralysis. We just talked about Hick-Hyman law. We just talked about decision fatigue. Cognitive load is also a thing that you utilize to talk about why less things should be on the screen or why something should be more simplistic. Progressive disclosure is also one of those things. But when we get to cognitive load, I ask the question like, can anyone answer me just off the top of their heads? What are the three types of cognitive load? Anyone in chat?
Nothing yet. Let's go to the next slide.
Okay.
Having to remember what you were doing while on another page.
All right. I'm gonna go to the next slide. The next slide is the end of my stuff for this, other than talking about cognitive load. So I'm gonna just go right to it. So cognitive load and overload. So you've got three different types of cognitive load. Intrinsic, it's related to the inherent difficulty of the task. It varies based on the person's knowledge and skills. Sorry about that. Extraneous, related to difficulties of not the task, but rather its accessibility and presentation. And germane, related to processing and assimilating new information. So if you're talking about cognitive load, please do some research, learn about what it really is. This is a common thing I see with young and mid-level designers. They're talking about cognitive load in a way where they're just like cognitive load, as if it means something. And it's like, it means some specific things. It's important to do it that way. And I do want to go back one slide now. So let's do that. Because I have too much cognitive load going on for other reason. I've got cognitive overload has happened to me. And it's how I feel at the end of this presentation. I cannot. So what happens with cognitive overload is there's just too much stuff going on all at once. You get tired and you give up. Your brain gives up. This happens when you don't use progressive disclosure to fix choice paralysis, when you don't worry about things like causing decision fatigue, when you don't use Gestalt principles correctly to organize your layout so that things are grouped correctly so people understand where they all are. You'll get cognitive overload happening. It isn't always to do with too many things are on the page at once or too many things are in the process all at once. Sometimes it's how you organize them is just a mistake there. So, hopefully that helps you all with being able to have discussions about these things with your stakeholders and with your users. And also, when you don't have time to research, sometimes just using these principles will get you through it, right? Sometimes you'll be able to find yourself like, I can't really have a bunch of interviews with the users. Well, good news is this is just the tip of the iceberg with the number of things out there that are related to usability principles. There's so many of them. I've just picked a few here to go through. that I see come up all the time in my career, and I'm guessing they come up in your career too if you're watching this. All right, last thing. Like I said, I read this book. You should all read it. Everything I just talked about is inside there. And if you look up my name on Amazon, it comes up. And it has things like the elaboration likelihood model, social proof, progressive disclosure, multitasking inefficiency, task switching costs, habituation, endowed progress effect, behavioral momentum, attentional blink. Um, and within all of those things, right, it's stuff that you can it goes through a format where it shows you what it is, and then it talks about how to describe it to stakeholders. And I also have an example of where I used it in my career and how it helped me move forwards. What else did I have for you? Oh, I'll put my LinkedIn in the chat. And did we have further questions and all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah, I do have one that going back to the resources. I had it wrong. It wasn't for choice paralysis. It was for
Oh,
the resources for aesthetic usability effect and the patterns that you had.
here, let me go find them for you.
And I
All
will say
right.
that Cajetan is planning on coming to the summer social. So if you want to like
Yes.
check his ear when you're there,
You can bug me there. That'll be great. Okay, so scanning patterns. I'd say your number one resource for scanning patterns, if you want stuff on that, is just type it into Google and say, all right, Z pattern. There will be lots of information. If you need like actual references, we've got the Nielsen Norman Group has an article, F-shaped pattern for reading web content. Uh, Rainer K, whoever that was, Psychology Bulletin has some things. Busher, Cottrell, Morris, and more. They had a human factors in computing systems article that came out in 2009 that talks all about it. I can post a link to my book in the chat too if you want to do that. And
Mhm.
also, you can just, I mean, for this one, you don't have to buy a book by some guy you're watching a presentation on. You can just look it up on Google. It'll tell you all about those. So that was the first one was patterns, and what was the other one?
the aesthetic usability effect that
Oh
you
yeah, aesthetic
um,
usability effect. Let's go back to that one.
and if that wasn't
Gosh.
the correct one that someone sent me that question to, just
Yeah. Okay. So you've got a bunch of people there. You got a bunch of books that are written on that. Human Computer Interaction by Asenhal. That's a classic in 2004. That has stuff about that in there. Chernitsky, Interacting with Computers. And then you got the International Journal of Human Computer Studies. Back in 2010, had a whole thing on that too. I'd recommend the Human Computer Interaction book. It's heavy. Like that's the other thing that I wanted to tell you all about our books and why I wrote this little thing is when you're doing trying to do a quick reference, it can be really hard to go through some of these giant books that I'm stacking my laptop on right now to find like that little piece of that little nugget of data that you need to be able to move your process forwards.
yeah, I agree with that. I do have a couple giant textbooks like that that have felt
Yeah.
very heavy to get through. Um, do you have a favorite principle yourself?
You know, I really love thinking about choice paralysis. It comes up all the time in my life. I mean, you might have noticed. It's just like one of those things. I even apply it to like just a simple conversation with someone, right? If you're out to dinner with someone new and you're talking to them, it's a little bit of a life hack. You've all been there, right? Where you start talking to someone and they tell you their whole life story, and of course, in Minnesota, we are really opposed to this, but they tell you their whole life story, and you go home and you're like, I am never talking to that person ever again. I don't want to do that. I've got too many things to think about now, and I don't know how I feel about them, right? Versus somebody else who maybe gives you three key highlights about themselves and just kind of focuses in on maybe three things, and then you go home and you're like, oh, yeah, that person was really cool. I want to get to know them a little more, right? So they're somehow, and I don't think most people are manipulative and deceptive, right, or deliberately being terrible with you, but somehow some people know how to do that naturally and other people don't. Um, Being a person who really likes basketball cards, I tended to be the person who just, tells you everything about everything all at once. And it took me a while, but reading like through Choice Brown, I was like, oh, I can socialize better via this particular concept. And I don't mean it to like, you know, pull one over on anyone, but at the same time, it has been a good principle to understand.
Troy made a comment that says we have 2 hours to watch a movie, but it takes 45 minutes to decide which to watch.
Oh, yeah.
And then Chris,
So,
and then you fall asleep.
yeah. What do you do in that situation? Oh, wow. Yeah. I think that actually gosh, it brings up another thing is mental models. So if any of you have seen the new Netflix layout, that's been a bit controversial, the new Netflix layout. And they've actually tried to follow some of these principles when they're doing it. It's kind of noticeable with they're making you make four choices. They're kind of keeping the screen like there's less content on the screen at once. So it's a little easier to make decisions because you're browsing through. For somebody that's looking for something that and they know what they want to watch, it's terrible. It's terrible. Melissa, you're correct. All right, I'm looking at the chat now. I can finally see it.
I do have the kind of a question comment to ask about it is that
Yeah.
as someone who is still pretty new to this industry and I've been learning all those things, like learning all of the concepts and then trying to understand those concepts and then trying to finesse it to the other people that I work with to make sure that it's like translated for them to understand. Because I can't just be there being like, hey, this is a defining thing that's existed for,
Hmm.
20 years
Yeah.
in UX, like we should be doing this. Like, is there any like advice that you would give somebody, you know, like me, or
Yes. Yeah.
to just
Yeah.
have that type of translation?
So use analogies, right? Like the Chipotle thing. Think of things that are in the real world that are using that concept already, and then apply it to your argument. And instead of coming at it like initially with like, no, this is a truth. Nobody likes to be beaten over the head with a big book full of research, right? That's a way to turn someone off and make them not want to pay attention to you. So I suggest when you're in that situation, start with something relatable, something that they've experienced already, if you can do it, right? And if you can't do it, learn more about that concept or principle that you're after, right? Learn more about it until you understand it clearly. Look around in the world and see if it's applied anywhere that becomes relatable, right? So you've all got choice paralysis already. Like that's an easy one. But if you're thinking about aesthetic usability effect, you have that too, cars, right? When you go through any of these principles that you find, anything that where there's been lots and lots of research, your first layer, your first bit of progressive disclosure should be, hey, here's this example of this in the real world. Don't even talk about it as like this is all well researched and everything else. Do that after. If there's resistance, then slowly bring in like, oh yeah, by the way, Nielsen Norman Group and this other thing did these studies, and here's this stuff, and go from there. Don't lead with that knockout punch because it's not going to happen and it won't go well for you most of the time.
So speaking of it, I don't see a question around, so I'm going to ask one more if everyone's okay with it. Speaking of things that like don't go well, so like sometimes I feel like we do all the right things with all the right research and we still don't necessarily get our way. And it may not exactly happen like with the stakeholders, and we might be told like, it's a top-down decision, we're doing these things. Is there any type of advice that could soften that type of blow or have that communication with stakeholders? Sorry,
All
I was
right, you're
what?
talking about
Sorry.
way more complicated stuff. I hope everyone is hearing this one. This is a good one. So I look at it this way, right? Um, as you're going through your career, as you're doing your job at one place, like you're working through, you're earning you're earning a bit of capital as you go, right? To be able to say like, no, I disagree with this. I think you should do it this other way, right? I think what you have to do is carefully pick and choose the ones that you can win, right? When you're stuck in a situation where it's like, this is a top-down decision. Well, uh, don't just die on that hill of like, no, 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 no. The research says this, right? Like carefully pick and choose, like, is it really that important? Is it going to affect the users in some extreme negative way, right? And if it is going to expect, if it is going to do that, you have to have some rapport built up already to where people trust you. And the way that happens is this give and take kind of thing that happens over time. So you have to have made some decisions where they trust you and it worked out, right? And then you can use that to get your way on some of these things. But you have to be really careful. Like if it's something where they're just like, oh yeah, I want to move that button over here for some reason. You're like, oh, that's a feature that no one's going to use anyway. Don't worry about it, right? And also make sure when you're doing your analysis, think about, and I know you don't want to do this as a designer, but think about the earlier thing about, is this going to make us money, right? Is this and at the end of the day, these businesses, the business people in particular, they're wanting outcomes, right? More so than all the output that we will do. The outcome's the most important part. And think about what the outcome of that will be from a business perspective as well as a design perspective. And when you're arguing through with them, if it's really, really important, you've got to stop them from making a critically bad business decision. You can do that, but make sure you're right.
Cool. I don't I don't see any more questions right now, but I figured I like just for kind of closing it out. Corian said agreed it's about explaining the trade-offs. And I will say for the people who are on here now, keep an eye on Slack for like the future events, and like Cajetan will be on there soon and he'll be on the summer social. But the one thing I was going to ask, as somebody who just went through a bunch of hiring yourself, is that you saw a lot of people go through interviews and you saw a lot of people with their portfolios. Do you have any things that like would be good tips of like things that stood out for you that were kind of like,
Sure. Yeah, I can talk about that. I'd say for your portfolio, when you're doing a design portfolio for me, I like to see outcomes up front as much as possible. This matters to me. So I do want to see like all the stuff that's behind, but I've seen too many portfolios where exactly outcomes are greater than output. Thank you, Corey. That's exactly what I'm saying. I want to see that you have some outcomes. I am tired of looking at portfolios where you show me all your research and all your decision making and everything else, and you don't show me any outcome until the very end. I do not want to read through, what adds up to 5 pages of post-it notes. This does not do anything for me. Um, Give me lead with like, don't bury the lead, right? That's what we say in all kinds of types of conversations. Don't do that to us hiring managers. We're looking at hundreds of your portfolios. We don't want to see all of that stuff over and over again. Show me something that makes me go, oh, that's really cool. There's a before after. Show me a before after. That's like one of my favorite things to look at. I hardly ever see them, by the way. I'll just say this. Hardly anyone puts a before after right on top of like their project. Like this is the before, this is the after. And then show me some other screens that show me what that outcome was, and then talk about those outcomes a little bit if you have privy to that information, right? Like what percentage of X, Y, and Z went up? What happened, right? How many users told you they love this? What are some quotes from them? Do that. Then you can go into whatever design process you ended up using and talking about how you researched it and all this other stuff. Like that's great. That's all great information. But I sometimes feel like what people expect me to read all of that when I have to go through 100 of you. I'm not going to do it. I'll tell you that. And talking to my peers, we don't do it very often. So we
On the,
really want to see just you put that hit out there like right away.
I mean, on the flip side, I would say that I worked really hard on that long division. I want you to see that I did my math properly, but I think I hear what you're saying about it. And Roland said, do password protected portfolios have less priority than others due to time?
So I haven't run into that. I don't mind if the resume is something where I'm really interested in the candidate. I will go right ahead and look at their portfolio, even if there's a password. I'm not too worried about it. It doesn't come up. Um, it might bother some people. That then again, that's the other thing that you really want to do well is make your resume um, pop somehow. And my advice for that is, again, with your summary, lead with some outcomes. Give me a reason to keep reading.
Roland said,
You're
thank.
welcome, Roland.
Okay. On the topic of portfolios and case studies, any advice for when you don't have and can't get qualitative outcome metrics?
Yes, it's really hard. So in those situations, wow me right away with some kind of image that makes me think, oh, I want to see this. I want to see what happened here. Um, if you don't have like anything where you can say, well, this is the data on what happened, and I understand it happens, right? This is a little pro tip. Talk to everyone at your company who's involved in getting those metrics, and make sure you have a good relationship with them, and get those every once in a while. Like just reach out to whoever is holding those keys and find out, like, hey, what did we increase the number of did we the big thing for B2B is you just talk about attrition rates and you say, oh, when the feature came out, did the attrition rates go down any? Talk to the salespeople if you have to, talk to the customer service people, find out some details if you can to get those. And if you still can't get them, exactly. Those are your friends. Thank you, Corin. This one's good. So if you can't get them, what you want to do in that portfolio is I'm making like a decision pretty quickly if your resume fits whatever it is I'm looking for, I'm making a decision pretty quickly on whether or not I want to look at the rest of your portfolio. So lead with the stuff that is big and exciting. Make me go, oh, okay, this person's a great designer. I think I want to look at their stuff. Right? And if you can't do that, I'm sorry. You're welcome. All right.
Well, we are almost at the end of time. If someone
Yep.
has any other questions, I think at this point you can probably reach out to Cajetan on LinkedIn. He did put his
Yep.
link to LinkedIn inside the chat if you want to grab it. And just from working with Cajetan, he's a super friendly guy if you don't see it yourself. So like he's usually pretty open to asking any questions. And as being like somebody who came into this industry right away and being the associate designer, I asked him thousands. So he is now prepared.
I'm prepared. I've answered every question anyone could ask.
So
All right.
thank you so much for your time and your presentation tonight.
All
And we
right.
will see you at the summer social.
You'll see me at the summer social. I'm looking forward to it. I hope to see you all there. All right. Thank
All
you,
right.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.